Maggie Ellison wakes to the faint sound of her husband whispering in the hallway at 3:12 a.m. She's not supposed to hear it, but the words catch in her gut. She lies still, only her eyes, moving beneath the half-shadowed ceiling of their bedroom, listening. The floorboards creak lightly beyond the doorway, followed by a hush of movement. Then Curtis's voice, low, careful, the kind of tone one uses when secrets are being shared. Her fingers curl slightly around the edge of the bed sheet. Curtis never made calls this late, and when he did talk business, it was never in a whisper. She tries to make sense of it. An old client, maybe? A friend going through something? But no friend sounds like a threat in the dark. Not at that hour, not with a voice like that. By the time Curtis steps back into the bedroom, the hallway light is off, and Maggie's eyes are closed, her breathing steady. She feels the dip of the mattress beside her. He smells like cinnamon in the outdoors, faintly, like he'd stepped out for more than just a glass of water. He slides under the blanket without a word. In the soft hours of morning, after Curtis begins to snore, Maggie rises, careful not to wake him. The air is cold. She wraps a cardigan over her flannel pajamas and pads into the kitchen, flipping on the radio out of habit. A mellow voice from NPR is discussing the upcoming town parade and projected turnout for the Thanksgiving potluck. Maggie pours herself a cup of coffee from the old drip pot she still insists on using, even though Curtis bought a fancy single-serve one last Christmas. At the window, the trees outside are bare, save for a few rust-colored leaves hanging stubbornly. The Ellison house, a white colonial just off Branford's Maple Street, has stood quiet for decades. Maggie thinks about the way the shadows played along the hallway floor last night, the sliver of moonlight slicing through the house like a blade. Her thoughts are interrupted by the sound of Curtis's steps. He enters the kitchen, rubbing his neck, and offers her a kiss on the cheek. "You're up early," he says, heading for the coffee. She hums in response. "Been thinking," he continues, voice casual. "We should probably get a better handle on our records. Just in case." She looks over her mug, eyebrows lifting slightly. "Our records?" "Yeah," he nods, pouring his cup. "Like, passwords, account info, assets. Could be smart to have everything in one place." Maggie sips her coffee. "Is something wrong?" "No," he says quickly, smiling. "Just planning ahead." Dana, the neighbor from next door, taps on the back screen not long after. She holds a foil-wrapped dish and is already halfway into the kitchen before Maggie opens the door. "Apple pie," Dana announces. "Thought I'd bring it by early. We're heading upstate tomorrow. Figured I'd better deliver while I still remember." Maggie chuckles, thanking her, and notices how Curtis lingers in the background, face unreadable. Dana stays a few minutes chatting about holiday traffic and how her mom still insists on using the same cranberry sauce from a can. Before she leaves, she glances at Curtis, then back at Maggie with a half smile. "He's cheerful today," she says softly, handing off the pie. "Like, really cheerful." When Curtis steps out for his morning walk, Maggie returns to the kitchen to clean up. She's wiping down the counter when she spots something she didn't notice before. A folder tucked halfway beneath yesterday's newspaper, just inside Curtis's briefcase. She isn't in the habit of snooping, but the label catches her eye. "Property transfer drafts. Confidential." Her heart thuds once. She doesn't open the folder, yet. Instead, she writes down the label and tucks it into her recipe notebook. Maggie finally opens the folder. Inside is a legal draft transferring ownership of their house solely to Curtis. Her breath catches, not in panic, but in a kind of cold internal quiet, the kind of silence that settles in when realization shifts from suspicion to certainty. The header reads, "Joint Asset Reallocation Proposal," and below it, in tidy legalese, are sentences that loop and coil around the heart of it. Maggie signs here, and everything, every nail in the porch, every brick of the fireplace, becomes Curtis's. The kitchen is still. Only the faint hum of the refrigerator reminds her the world hasn't stopped. Her coffee has gone cold, forgotten. The folder paper smells faintly of toner, maybe even fresh ink, recently printed. She rereads it, line by line, looking for something that might explain. A clause, a footnote, a rationale that makes sense. There is none. Curtis walks into the room just as she's tucking the folder back into the briefcase. He doesn't see her. He's on the phone, mumbling something about an adjustment clause and final signatures. She stands still at the counter, facing the window, watching him through his reflection in the glass. When he notices her, he lowers the phone with a smile too smooth for the early hour. "Morning," he says. "Thought you might still be asleep." "Got an early start," she replies, her voice even. "Thinking we should try the pumpkin porch for lunch today," he adds, breezy. "You used to like that place." Maggie agrees with a nod, though the weight in her chest makes her feel as if she's moving underwater. By noon, they're seated at a corner booth in the pumpkin porch, a cozy cafe dressed in burnt orange garlands and plaid table runners. A ceramic turkey decorates each table. The smell of nutmeg and baked apples lingers in the air. Maggie orders her usual, black coffee, a cinnamon waffle, while Curtis opts for a turkey melt he barely touches. Across the room, a young woman is sweeping crumbs from a side table. She wears a name tag, Lana. Her hair is tucked under a knit cap, and when she glances toward their booth, her gaze lingers on Maggie a moment too long. Maggie offers a polite smile. Lana responds with a small nod and looks away quickly. Curtis chatters about his friend Rick, who's thinking of moving to Florida, about property taxes going up, about how the market's turning, always just vague enough to sound casual, always just polished enough to be practiced. After lunch back home, he hands her an envelope as they take off their coats. "Just a tax thing," he says, shaking off snow from his scarf. "Shouldn't take more than a second. Sign it, and I'll drop it off tomorrow." Maggie takes the envelope without opening it. The signature line is visible through the thin paper, right above her printed name. No joint anything this time. Just her name, clean and alone. She smiles. "I'll read it over first, bright and early." Curtis pauses, then shrugs. "Sure, just a formality." That night, Maggie sits in her study, a soft blanket over her knees, a lamp casting amber light on the corner of her desk. The envelope rests beside her. She opens it with steady fingers, pulls the document out, and reads. It's another transfer, slightly reworded, still in his favor. Her hands are calm as she folds the paper neatly. She walks to the filing cabinet, slips it into a file labeled personal, locks the drawer, and pockets the key. Maggie slips the document into her purse, locks the drawer, and opens her laptop. She types into Google, "Is property transfer without consent legal in Connecticut?" At 4:07 a.m., Maggie uses a free legal app to call a helpline. A calm voice on the line says, "Ma'am, you may be looking at fraud." The words are spoken gently, almost as if meant to soften the truth, but there's no cushion for this kind of fall. She's seated at the kitchen table, wrapped in an old cardigan, a cup of chamomile gone cold beside her. The house is quiet, too quiet. Even the wind outside has settled, the maple trees frozen in their skeletal stillness. Maggie clutches the phone tighter. "Can you walk me through the documents again?" the voice asks. She does, reading the phrasing she memorized. When she finishes, the line goes silent for a moment. "You need to talk to someone in person," the woman finally says, "preferably today." The sun isn't even up when Maggie starts printing. She lays out every financial record she can access, joint accounts, utility bills, old loan statements. She prints screenshots from her phone, recent transfers, Curtis's suggested record sheet. Everything goes into a manila folder marked in pencil just in case. By late morning, she steps into the Branford Legal Resource Center, a small building with peeling green paint and a brass plaque on the door. Inside, it smells faintly of old wood and lemon cleaner. A receptionist, young, tidy, focused, nods toward a waiting room lined with chairs that don't quite match. Maggie waits. 15 minutes later, a woman in her 60s with a silver bun and navy blazer steps into the room. "Mrs. Ellison." "Yes," Maggie replies, rising. "I'm Eleanor Beck," the woman says. Her voice is calm but crisp, like someone used to moving through storms with her umbrella intact. "Let's talk in my office." They sit across from each other, in a room filled with legal books, diplomas, and a window overlooking the post office across the street. Maggie explains everything, what she heard, what she read, the sudden interest in emergency documents. She hands over the papers. Eleanor listens without interrupting, nodding only once or twice. When Maggie finishes, the lawyer opens the folder and studies the pages. A few minutes later, she places a yellow highlighter on one line. Here, Maggie leans forward. This notary seal? It's predated. The notary it references didn't renew their license until last spring. The date on this document is from February. Maggie exhales slowly. So, Eleanor says, leaning back, if you had signed this, you'd have given up the house entirely and not even known it. The room is suddenly warmer than before. Maggie loosens the scarf around her neck, but the feeling pressing on her chest has more to do with shame than heat, not because she missed something, but because she had come so close to accepting it. There's a knock at the door. Come in, Eleanor says. The door opens and the receptionist steps in, carrying another folder. Sorry to interrupt. Additional case notes for the Ellison file. Thank you, Lana, Eleanor says, taking the file. Maggie freezes. Lana. The young woman pauses, glancing at Maggie more closely now. Something flickers in her eyes. Recognition or something near it. As she turns to leave, she stops, fingers still on the doorframe. Did you ever teach English at Lincoln High? Curtis gently places 2 cups of coffee on the table. We should talk, he says, smiling too easily. Maggie knows that smile. It's never just coffee. It's as I've rehearsed this expression, worn like a well-pressed suit. They sit across from each other at the breakfast nook. The sunlight spills over the counter, illuminating dust motes that dance in the quiet. Curtis slides one mug toward her, steam rising between them like a veil. I've been thinking, he begins, folding his hands. Maybe it's time we reevaluate things. You know, where we are, what we both want. Maggie raises her brows slightly. After 38 years? His smile doesn't falter. We've had a good run. No regrets, of course, but it just feels like we've outgrown each other. Outside, a neighbor's golden retriever barks twice and goes quiet. Maggie doesn't speak. She waits. Curtis presses on. We can do this the easy way, amicably. I've already drafted some documents. Ellen or Beck can take a look if you'd rather have someone neutral. Is that what this is? She asks. Neutral. He shrugs. We both move on. Clean. No bitterness. She nods slowly. Just paperwork. He reaches for his mug. Exactly. Later that day, Maggie is back in Eleanor's office. The walls feel closer than before, the winter light sharper through the blinds. Lana brings in tea without saying much, though she lingers for a second before closing the door. I've read through the latest draft, Eleanor says, tapping a folder. It's cleaner. No obvious fraud, but it's still designed to benefit him. He wants to walk away with the house, the secondary account, and a slice of your annuity. Lovely, Maggie murmurs, gaze steady. There's something else, Eleanor adds. Lana caught it. She opens the folder, slides out a transaction record. These financial transfers he cited, they're time-stamped before the accounts even existed. Curtis made a mistake. Maggie leans forward. So we have him. We do, Eleanor says. But we'll need to move quickly. There's a knock. Lana steps in again, this time holding a printout. Sorry, she says, glancing at Maggie. More records, some flagged entries from the credit union. Bring them in, Eleanor replies. As Lana sets the papers down, she hesitates. Then she meets Maggie's eyes fully. I've been meaning to ask, she says softly. Did you ever teach 10th grade English at Lincoln High? Maggie studies her, the wide, careful eyes, the quiet confidence. A flicker of memory stirs, classroom posters, a shy girl in the 3rd row with a worn copy of To Kill a Mockingbird clutched like armor. Maggie slowly nods. Lana smiles faintly. You helped me once. Let's return the favor. Maggie walks past the town square. Children rehearse a Thanksgiving play. Across the street, Curtis exits a bank, phone glued to his ear, not smiling anymore. His suit jacket flaps open in the wind, and he doesn't notice her. But Maggie notices everything. The stiff edge of his posture, the briskness in his stride, the way he doesn't look up from the phone, even when the town's pastor offers him a gentle nod. She adjusts the scarf around her neck and continues on toward Eleanor's office. It's the day of the hearing, and the morning carries a strange calm, like Branford itself is holding its breath. Inside the law office, Lana is already at the copier, eyes focused, hair pinned in a neat twist. She looks up as Maggie walks in and offers a quiet smile, not the kind meant for reassurance, but solidarity. Ready? She asks. As I'll ever be, Maggie replies. Eleanor greets her in the conference room, papers spread neatly across the table. The smell of coffee and lemon polish lingers in the air. We'll present the transaction evidence first, Eleanor says, tapping the file. Then we'll highlight the mismatch in timestamps and the notary irregularities. If the judge sees what we see, Curtis won't just lose his claim. He'll have some explaining to do. Maggie nods. She doesn't feel nervous, just steady, like someone who's finally found the rhythm of a song she'd been humming half her life. Later, in the annex courtroom behind Brantford's town hall, the judge enters with a rustle of robes and a quiet tap of the gavel. The room is modest, wooden benches, an old radiator clanking in the corner, but the weight of the moment fills the space. Curtis sits beside his attorney, gaze locked forward, jaw tight. When he sees Maggie enter, there's the faintest flicker, an almost smile, but it fades as quickly as it comes. Eleanor presents the case with calm precision. She lays out the transaction records, highlighting the discrepancies in the timeline. These accounts, she says, were opened in March. The transactions in question are dated February, weeks before they legally existed. The judge frowns, reviewing the papers. And this notarization, Eleanor continues, holding up another document, refers to a notary whose license expired at the time of signing. In fact, it wasn't renewed until months later. Curtis's lawyer rises, objecting weakly. There may have been clerical overlap. The judge cuts in. You're suggesting a licensed financial institution processed predated transactions and a legal notary certified documents while inactive. The room is silent. We also have testimony, Eleanor says, that the defendant requested personal asset control under the guise of emergency preparedness while privately discussing plans to exit the marriage and retain sole ownership. Curtis shifts in his seat. His fingers twitch at the edge of the table. Your Honor, his lawyer says, rising again, this is a domestic matter. At most, it's a miscommunication. Eleanor doesn't flinch. With intent to defraud. The judge looks over the bench, expression unreadable. He flips through the folder one last time, his fingers lingering on a page. This may not just be a civil matter. Curtis walks out of the courthouse alone. He passes a hand-lettered sign. Thanksgiving dinner, all are welcome. But he doesn't even glance at it. The wind tugs at his collar as he descends the courthouse steps, the sky overhead a dull pewter. The courthouse bell rings softly behind him. Not a celebration, just a chime, marking time, indifferent to his defeat. Maggie remains inside a few minutes longer. There's no rush. She listens as Eleanor speaks quietly with the clerk, finalizing the dismissal. She signs where needed, then stands, smoothing the lapel of her coat. She thanks the judge with a nod, a gesture of dignity rather than triumph. Outside, the town is easing into early evening. Strings of warm light flicker along Maple Street, and the scent of roasted turkey drifts faintly from the community center. Children laugh somewhere nearby. The world continues. Back home, Maggie sets a modest table for one, a cloth napkin, her grandmother's silver, and a small roasted turkey breast from the deli downtown. She doesn't like candles. There's something comforting in the plainness. The quiet isn't empty anymore. It's chosen. She takes her time eating. Between bites, she watches the dusk settle in. The view from her kitchen window frames the neighbor's porch, where a group of teens are unloading pies from the back of a station wagon. Laughter echoes, familiar and grounding. Later, as she clears the dishes, she notices the mail by the door. A small envelope sits on top, addressed in careful script. Inside is a card from a former student, a boy named Evan who once struggled with run-on sentences and stage fright. Dear Mrs. Ellison, it begins, I'm writing to say thank you. You told me once that stories have power. I believed you then, but now I understand what you meant. I'm graduating next month. I wouldn't be here without you. Maggie sets the card down, touched. She reaches for her tea, then notices her phone buzzing softly on the counter. A new message. It's from Lana. You helped me find my voice. I hope I helped you find yours back. In a quiet kitchen lit by soft evening light, Maggie found not victory, but peace, the kind that comes after standing her ground with grace. She didn't need applause, only the quiet knowing that she had reclaimed her voice. Kindness, even when given long ago and without expectation, has a way of circling back when we need it most. Like a porch light left on through the night, it guides us home when the path feels uncertain. If this story stirred something in your heart, perhaps today's the day to offer a little light to someone else still walking in the dark. A sleek, red Mercedes sat parked on the driveway, a car Evelyn had once dreamed of, now driven by someone she had never met. The October air was crisp, leaves gathering like small secrets along the edges of the front steps. Evelyn stood behind the lace curtain of her front window, the chipped ceramic mug in her hand growing cool. The mug still bore the faded silver lettering of their 25th wedding anniversary. Ron had chosen it himself at a gift shop in Charleston, if she recalled correctly. She hadn't used anything else since. She took a quiet sip and watched as the sunlight bounced off the hood of the Mercedes. Red, flashy. Ron was never subtle. She had once admired that about him, how he seemed to announce himself to the world without apology. Now it felt like a shout in a silent room. Her eyes lowered to the mailbox, the lid barely closed. Probably catalogs and campaign flyers. She'd fetch them later. Right now, her attention shifted to the corner of the coffee table, where a stack of papers rested neatly beside a leather-bound folder. She walked over, set her mug down, and opened her laptop. The retirement account interface greeted her with polite indifference. Password, the name of their old dog, followed by their wedding year. She scrolled through the activity log, and there it was, $78,250, wired 4 days ago to Southern Prestige Motors. Ron's name on the authorization, no joint approval, no notification, just gone. She didn't blink. Her fingers moved steadily as she reached for the folder marked Divorce Filing Submitted, dated 3 days ago. She had walked those papers down to the courthouse herself, wore navy slacks, and her mother's brooch. She hadn't told anyone, not Linda, not Tina, certainly not Ron. Not yet. The floorboards creaked as she moved across the living room. Every detail in the house whispered a story. The knit throw draped on the couch, the worn welcome mat, the faint scent of lavender from last night's bath oil. This wasn't just a house. It was a history. She stood by the mantel, eyeing the wedding photo. Ron's grin, confident, a little arrogant. Her own smile, quieter, full of trust. She exhaled slowly. Somewhere along the way, the trust had been spent more recklessly than the retirement fund. The kettle clicked off. She poured water into the mug, dropped in a chamomile bag, and returned to the window. The car was still there, glinting like a provocation. Temporary tags, dealership frame. Kaylee, no doubt, was inside, adjusting the mirrors, marveling at how leather seats could feel like victory. Ron hadn't mentioned her name until last spring, when Evelyn found a crumpled receipt for 2 tickets to Nashville. He said it was a work trip. She knew better, but said nothing. Not because she was weak, but because she was waiting. Ron was careless. Not with his appearance or his charm, but with paper. And Evelyn had always believed paper didn't lie. On the desk sat the latest bank statement. She scanned it again, noting the patterns. Incremental transfers, small enough to avoid suspicion but consistent. A man quietly building his escape route, unaware that Evelyn had already charted hers. The clock chimed 10 o'clock. She glanced outside once more and caught sight of Tina, her downstairs neighbor, heading to her car. Tina gave a small wave, her jacket a bit too thin for the weather, her steps hurried. Evelyn waved back. She recalled the evening a month ago when Tina had knocked, flustered over a mortgage pre-approval document. Evelyn had invited her in, made tea, and walked her through every clause. "Thank you," Tina had said, eyes wide with relief. No one ever takes the time. That was the thing about Evelyn. She always took the time. Until time ran out. Back at her desk, she neatly arranged the transaction printout beside the divorce petition. The lines were clean, the evidence solid. She didn't feel triumphant, just clear. From the kitchen, the oven timer beeped, sweet potato slices for lunch. She walked in slowly, her socked feet brushing against the cool tile. The scent of cinnamon lingered. She opened the fridge and took out a jar of homemade apple butter. Linda had made it last week, said it was a new recipe, less sugar, more spice. The back door creaked, footsteps, a jangle of keys. Evelyn turned toward the hallway just as Ron entered, holding a paper takeout bag. "You won't believe what I just bought," he said, grinning. "Mrs. Harper, I think your husband tried to cash something he wasn't supposed to." The words came out in a whisper, barely audible over the hum of the espresso machine behind them. Tina sat across from Evelyn at a small round table in Maple Leaf Cafe, her hands wrapped tightly around a paper cup of chai latte. She looked younger today, less polished than in her work clothes, with her auburn hair tied into a loose bun and the faded denim of her jacket frayed at the cuffs. A tattoo of a crescent moon peeked from beneath her sleeve. Evelyn stirred her tea slowly, the spoon tapping gently against ceramic. The cafe smelled of cinnamon and worn leather, and sunlight spilled in through the tall windows, casting patterns onto the tile floor. "It was strange," Tina continued, her voice hushed. "He came in right before closing last week. Real casual. Asked me about options for early withdrawal from a retirement fund. Said it was for a business venture, but he seemed off." Evelyn met her gaze, calm but intent. "Did he mention my name?" Tina nodded. "He said you were in agreement but couldn't make it in. Then he asked what kind of authorizations were absolutely required." Evelyn set down her spoon. She didn't rush Tina. The younger woman's eyes darted around the cafe, as if afraid someone might overhear. No one was paying attention, just an older couple sharing pie near the window and a teenager with headphones scrolling through his phone in the corner. "I didn't think much of it at first," Tina added, "but then yesterday I was filing old forms and saw a transfer slip with your name, except the signature looked traced off." Evelyn allowed a small, appreciative smile. "And you came to me because?" "Because you helped me when no one else did," Tina said. "That mortgage pre-approval?" "You sat with me for an hour. You explained every line like it actually mattered. People don't do that." Evelyn reached across the table and gently tapped Tina's knuckles. "You're doing the right thing." From her purse, Tina pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I probably shouldn't have printed this," she said, sliding it across the table. "But I made a copy, just in case." Evelyn opened it and studied the authorization form. Ron's name was there, along with a sloppily forged version of hers. She noted the date, exactly 1 day before the wire transfer. She folded the paper carefully and tucked it into her leather-bound notebook, the same one she had carried since the late 90s. A habit from her years in real estate law, nothing beat paper for remembering. Later that afternoon, back in her home office, Evelyn called Julian Brooks. His voice came through with the usual clipped precision. "Already started the trace," he said. "Most withdrawals were routed through two main accounts. Looks like he tried to keep things under the IRS threshold by splitting them. Anything offshore? Possibly, there's a pattern, but I'll confirm." "Thank you," Evelyn said. "And Julian?" "Yes?" "Pull insurance paperwork, too, on the new vehicle." There was a pause. "You think he listed it jointly?" "I think he got lazy." She ended the call and leaned back in her chair, letting her gaze drift toward the open window. Outside, a squirrel darted across the yard, kicking up amber leaves in its path. The light had begun to soften, casting long shadows across the porch. Her phone buzzed with a new notification. "Reservation confirmed. Charleston, 2 guests. October 14th. She didn't react, only turned slightly to the side and closed the window with a quiet click. In the fading light, she returned to the kitchen and opened the pantry. Behind the oatmeal and tea tin sat an envelope she'd prepared months ago, labeled simply, "For Court." She placed the forged authorization beside it, sealed the flap, and placed the envelope back on the shelf. The apple